Good evening, everybody. Let me start that again. Good evening, everyone. How is everyone going?
Good. Very good.
Good. Thank you to everyone that said that. This evening I wanted to touch on something that's probably close to each of us. Um, and one of the things that certainly each of us could attest to over the last 18 months, and that is change. Something that definitely we can't influence, and certainly something that is inevitable in everything that we do. So, get you all to close your eyes just for a second. Think back 2 years ago, and in that time, did you think what were you doing 2 years ago? First of all right. In that time, 2 years ago, did you think that you A would be wearing face masks? B, have international travel restrictions. C, understand that there is something going on in the world that is impacting every single country, every single pocket of the world, every single industry, every single family dynamic, every single person, rich, poor, indifferent. Did you think 2 years ago that there would be one thing that would have that effect across the world? Open your eyes. Put your hand up if you were that prophetic person. Pastor Pete excluded. Tick, 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 tick. Yes. What's the problem, Rob? But did anybody actually think that that would be something that we would be experiencing today? No? Well, you're not alone there. Uh, Now, with that, over the last 18 months, have you, during the 18 months, ever been in a situation where you felt overwhelmed? Where you felt, wow, what's going on? There's change, there's things going on, the unknown, ever changing environment. What do we do? So, what do we do? What can we do? How do we cope with ourselves through this? How do we support each other? And then there might be some of you today thinking, where is God in this? How can He be letting this happen? Well, today I wanted to explore this, and the best place to explore this is in the Bible. So we're going to refer to, of all places which have a lot of answers in the Bible, Psalm 46. And Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow. He shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Whoa. Now, it's a big chunk of a chapter to get through, but it's really important for us to work all the way through that. Because it starts out with the last 18 months. It starts out with all these things going wrong and everything. And then what it ends with is God. It ends with Him. It ends with that He is everything. He is the Almighty. And what a great psalm and relevance to us today. But how can we make sense of all this? What's trying to remain calm? What's trying to be in control? Not just for ourselves. Most of us have family that we're responsible for, children that we're responsible for, work that we're responsible for. So it's really essential that the mechanisms and tools that we utilise, we're able to adapt them to other people. So let's unpack that a little bit. And the best place to start is actually verse 1, because that actually sets out the mindset that we need to take. If we go back to the original question that I asked, why is God letting this happen? We actually need to change the question around and think of it a little bit differently. Instead of why is God letting this happen, the question should be, where is God during this trouble? The answer is in the very first verse. The author of the psalm, who we actually don't know, knows that when we are feeling this way, it's best to point out quickly and that is to say that God is there. He is our refuge. He is our strength and help when trouble is around. It's good to also point out and establish that God being there doesn't mean that he will change the circumstance. It can simply mean that he's there to support and walk with us whilst we're going through it. It took me back when I was actually writing this to a friend, and it's most recent. I've got this friend who's going through a rough time, and I've known him for 20 odd years. And when I came up to him and I was just talking along with him, I realised pretty much straight away that what he was looking from me wasn't for me to sit him down and critique what was going on and tell him all the things he's doing wrong and tell him how to fix it. What he actually wanted from me was someone to sit next to him, put my arm around him, COVID safe, and in a distance, but just in case there's any board members here. But you know, from a COVID safe point of view, put my arm around him and support him. That's all he was looking for. And this is exactly what God does for us. He is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. He is always there, even when we don't think he is. But I'm sure you're sitting there and saying, very easy to think and to say, Rob, but it's not that easy. Sometimes when things are tough, we first try and look at every other option and only turn to God when we exhausted everything and we are desperate. I read the story the other day there about a guy. I do like stories like this, and you'll know why in a second. There's about this guy who was walking near a cliff, enjoying the view, as we all do. Then all of a sudden, he slips and falls off. On the way down, which would have been absolute death. I think that's absolute death. Really the same thing. Correcting myself there. What would have been death, absolutely. He grabs onto a branch and is hanging there, just hanging on for dear life. And what do I do? I'm going to die here. So he starts thinking, and then he goes, is there a God? Starts thinking about God. So he calls out, God, help me, please. All of a sudden, a voice comes down and says, here I am. How can I help you? And the man responds with, save me, please. All of a sudden, the voice turns around and says, okay, do you trust me? And the man responds, yes, just please save me. God then responds, okay, let go. And the man thinks about it for a minute, and he thinks about it for 2 minutes. And then he shouts out, is there anybody else out there? And, as silly as that sounds, that's exactly what we do sometimes. We look for that easy fix. And sometimes God's way doesn't line up with ours, and it's going to be hard work, so we turn to someone else or something else. What do we do in these circumstances? Do you turn to someone else? Do you turn to something else when it gets tough? The answer is outlined in this psalm. Our first and only place is to take it to God. When we do that, we are tapping into a source that is never-ending and has the authority to overcome everything. He is our refuge and our strength. Instead of letting it turn over in our heads over and over again, we need to take it to him like a letter and spread it out before him. In Philippians 4:5-7, it says, let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition and thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And it's important to remember at that point that there is no limit, there is no thing that we cannot take to him. his source never ends. We see it in verse 4 of the psalm that it refers to a river whose stream make glad the city of God. This meaning the source never runs dry. Never runs dry. We can just go to that every single time. But it doesn't stop there. In verse 9, we are filled with comfort that not only is he our refuge, but also our God is in control. The author of the psalm purposely changes from describing who God is to letting us know that God is in control no matter what the circumstance. It's in that not only we get comfort that he is in control, but also peace in the circumstance, allowing us to keep our minds and hearts on him. In Isaiah 26, 3-4, it says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord himself is the rock eternal. Be still and know that I am God." And I'm sure you will agree that stillness can only exist when we are purposeful. We have to create the ability to listen. A great example of this is when Jesus and the disciples were in the boat and Jesus calmed the storm. Now, the significance of this story can't be underestimated. And the fact is, and there's a number of facts because of that. It's told in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And because it's told in those three things, we know it's of relevance. Those three books, we know that it's of relevance. But the other thing that we probably don't realise is that all the disciples were fishermen. And because they were fishermen and experienced fishermen, they'd been in storms before. You know, they'd seen rough seas before, they'd seen it go all wild before, and yet they were in the corner of the boat scared. So from that, we can deduct that that storm was one of the worst they've ever seen. They were scared. There was one person who wasn't scared, and he was sleeping in the boat, and that was Jesus, who they had to wake up. And at one word, he calmed the storm. At one word, he was able to, remove all the turmoil, remove all the issues, and bring calmness to the situation. But he can do this in our life also. Faith in Jesus is never misplaced. It has to do with just perspective and where your trust sits. As we've spoken about today, when things happen and it feels like everything is closing in and around us, we can sometimes go into an automatic fix mode or panic mode. But what we can see here is what God is telling us, and that is to be still. Walk with confidence that God is walking with you. But we can't stop here and just wait for things to happen to be still. We actually need to be in this mindset through the good times and the tough times. We need to deliberately find time to be still and dwell in his presence. When I was preparing this, I thought that I understood and actually spend time with God. But what I really did get, when I was looking into this more, I got a revelation. And being still when I'm driving my car to work and listening to worship and I'm thinking that I'm in the zone, that's not it. The enemy likes to bring distractions. It likes to bring busyness and distractions to our life so that we actually don't sit still and be purposeful and listen to God. And it's only in those moments where we are still and listening that God can speak into our life. It's only in those moments that he can actually instill what he wants to talk to us about. As I finish off, the one thing the psalm is telling us in verse 10, when the author was putting this down and stating, "Be still and know that I am God," I don't believe this was just about the quietening of our hearts. I think this was also a declaration to the enemy of the victory over circumstances, and already been claimed that Jesus has already won and that the enemy has no place or position over God's children. In other words, back off. As we close, one thing I want you to take away is that not how you can get yourself through your circumstance by yourself, but how God can work with you and through you. My question is, have you handed it over to him? Have you let go in faith and trust that he has it under control? Have you claimed and declared a victory? Do you have peace and confidence that God has it under control?
Well done. Question. Who's got a question? What are some practical things we can do to get into that place of being still and knowing God?
Purposeful. There are a number of things, from setting aside time, uninterrupted time, being disciplined in terms of how you look after that time. So if it's first thing in the morning, make sure that there's no interruptions, make sure that you've got digital devices away. Anything that you know, if you're doing your devotion on your phone, you know that's a distraction, don't use your phone. Which is an issue for most of us. So it's really just having a purposeful time where you're not going to be distracted, and you can actually get into some time with God and allow Him to work. You've got to give it a moment. And one of my issues is time, and especially at the moment, and being able to dedicate that to it. But where I find if I put aside half an hour in the morning and just leave the phone somewhere else and just sit there with the paper Bible, real Bible, and read that, I get so much more from it than if I'm lying in bed doing my devotions where it's nice and warm. It's really warm. I don't get as much out of it.
We will finish up by just a bit of feedback for you. I loved the creative, especially that start. It had everyone connected, and everyone could go back 2 years ago. This is crazy what become a little bit more normalized to it. And I thought that you really brought us back and sort of through that journey and saying, yes, God was actually there all the way through, and therefore He will be there further on. And your stories again was really, really good. Because to give one piece of critique or feedback, your stories, you use a lot of intonation with your voice, so you kind of animate, quicken the pace, slow it down. When you're explaining principles, you tend to be quite even in both the delivery and the pacing, and also tone. And so I would look at ways that you can sort of alternate your voice a little bit, make it go up a little bit, make it go down a little bit, pause, speed up certain parts, and so that it matches your storytelling a little bit more. Would be my only feedback there. So, well done. That's good on Rob.
Well, we are